question, actually a comment that I heard while I was on vacation. You guys, I talked about how I went to Arizona for 3 weeks. During a dinner conversation, someone made the comment of, you know, like we were talking about like lifting and things like that. They were saying something about like, I don't know, like how much I can bench or something like that. One of those weird questions that always comes up. And the comment was made that like, you know what, like I really don't care about muscle. Like I don't really want muscle. I just want to be skinny again. Thank you. And like my first instinct when I hear those questions, you hate those questions, yeah. Like I don't know why that always comes up, like how much do you bench? Like that's a whole nother subject. But so when that comment first came about like I just want to be skinny again, I'm like, okay, like when is again? Like when, like what are we comparing this to? And they were talking about when they were a teenager. I get it. You know, a lot of us were like smaller and I had to like kind of hold myself back because my first instinct is like, what do you mean you don't want muscle? Everyone wants muscle. But I get it. At some point in time, I'm sure, I guess I probably thought that way too. I don't know. But when we are like 30, 40, 50, right? And we're looking back at like, you know, when I was in high school and I was so athletic and I was like, I ran track or I was on the basketball team or whatever. Maybe you didn't do anything and you were just like, but I was so thin and I just want to look like that again. I just want to be skinny again. I don't care if I ever get muscle. Well, the bad news is that whether you wanted muscle or not then, you actually had some. So first of all, why are you comparing yourself to like 30 years ago? Like that's just craziness. You're in the marching band. Yeah. So first of all, and I talked about this we have our beginner strength training manual and I go on into detail about this in that chapter about that. Like you better not get that skinny again. Like don't just compare yourself to you in high school if you're like 40, 45, like that's just kind of weird. But when you were young, like 18, and my sons know because I like beat them over the head with this, my sons, my sisters, and all them, and I tell them like when you are, thank you guys for all the compliments, and I'm not saying that I want to get skinny. I'm a personal trainer and I'm saying what I say to people who say this all the time, they don't want muscle. We don't understand that when we are younger, that is when we have the most muscle mass ever. So things are good when we're young. That's when like your skin, you know, is like at its peak elasticity. It's when you have the most muscle mass. It's when you have like your bone mass is peaking. Like everything is so wonderful when you are young. And if you are not taking care of it then that is when the downward trend starts with your health or with your weight or with things like that. So even if you didn't want muscle mass, then you get it. You had it. So you just actually start losing it. So when you like look worse and you go to a trainer and they're like, okay, well, let's rebuild some of that muscle mass. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to help you to regain that youthful look that you had then. So even though you're like, I didn't lift weights then, it didn't matter. You were constantly peaking your muscle mass. You're 19 now. So see, you're at the perfect stage to keep the muscle mass that you have. And so it's the same thing that like I'm constantly telling my son now. I'm like, you know, if you don't start soon, like it's going to go downhill from here. Whereas right now it's really easy to, you know, gain muscle mass, even though it's not really muscle mass at that age. But that's the point. The point is that even though you think you may not want muscle, especially women, you know, we're like, I just want to be skinny again. And this was actually a male that said this to me, which was kind of why I think it like threw me, you know, for a loop, was that he said that. He's like, I just want to be skinny again like I was when I was like 19. So it's something for you to understand. When you're at your youngest, you actually do have muscle mass. So as you start aging, when you get 25, 35, 45, and you look back and you want that look, you're actually going to need to rebuild some of the lost muscle mass, because the more muscle mass you lose, the slower your metabolism is, and the slower your metabolism is, you're actually gaining back fat. every time you like lose weight and regain it. So it's something really, really important to consider. That's the reason why I always put so much emphasis on muscle. AJ's listening. AJ is my son. He knows I'm always harping on him about lifting. You know, once he graduated from high school, I'm like, dude, like, use it or lose it. Like, because right then you're at your smallest and you think like life is just going to be good and you're just going to float through life being that small forever. But you already barely have that much muscle mass as it is. And then you start losing it. And every decade that goes by, you're losing more and more and more muscle. And you're gaining more and more and more fat. So your body composition completely changes. So that look that we have in our heads of like, man, I looked so great then, that was muscle. So even if you don't want it, you do kind of want it. Like you think you don't want it, but you do. So that's just my little rant for that. Like I said, it wasn't even something that I was intending to talk about, but it is something that needs to be addressed because oftentimes people look at, you know, like lifting and getting and keeping muscle mass. Like when we talk about how, you know, crash dieting or dieting in ways or exercising in ways that causes you to lose muscle mass, and you're not really paying attention to what type of weight you're losing. A lot of times people think that they can dismiss it because they're like, I don't care what type of weight I lose as long as the scale goes down and I get skinnier. That may work like your first diet when you're like 19, 20, 21, but the more diets you do, the worse that you're going to look.